Hello, I'm JK with J Cruz Crafts. Thank you guys for joining me again for my second video. And for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, this is pretty much an extension of my online shop, the link being down below. This is a little bit more insight into me as a knitter and into my crafts. It is also a place where I plan to respond to some of the things that I see out there in the knitting world and craft world. As well as kind of give some explanations and tutorials of my own on subjects that I feel like there isn't enough out there to share. So hopefully you guys will be able to get some use out of this, both as someone who may be interested in knitting or crocheting, and maybe even a beginner that just wants to further get into the hobby itself. I have been knitting for 13 years, crocheting for 12 years, and sewing for little over 6 years now. I predominantly hail though, or deem myself as the knitting expert because that is what I know best and know and love most. This video I wanted to take time to actually explain some of the basic tools out there for knitters and kind of their pros and cons between them. If you're like me that knitted for a long time, but didn't really have anyone around you that also knits. I started when I was a child. I didn't learn from a family member. I didn't have access to internet all the time. So my inspiration came from whatever free patterns I was able to pull off of those little clips on the Michaels yarn shelves. I, for the longest time, did not know that there is more to knitting than your traditional knit stick. This is probably what 99.9% of the knitters out there have learned on. It can come shorter. I've seen them bigger. I've seen them fatter. It just really depends on your needle size. Now, generally when you have these, you're only working with two of them. One on your left hand, one on your right hand. One's casting on stitches, the other one you're pulling stitches off of it. This is great to do any and all basic things. You can do your lace knit work on it, you can knit your panels on it if you wanted to sew together a skirt or a bag or whatever have you. You can make your scars with it. If you don't mind making a hat that you have to sew the edges together on, all of that stuff can be done on the stick needles. The limits on the stick needle, two of them. One, if you want to do a no-sew project, there's very few of them that you can do on a stick needle. Albeit there are there are just not as many as there could be. The other part that honestly is probably the more prominent issue is there's a limit to how many stitches you can cast on. For those of you that already know something about knitting, casting on really is important for how big of a project or how small you want to go. A small project, it really doesn't matter how tiny you want to go with this as far as your width to it. You can put 5, you can put 10, you can put 20, whatever suits your needs. Now, if you're doing a big project, there's a limit to this. I can only squeeze on about 120 stitches, medium weight yarn, onto this stick. And when I say squeeze on, I mean I'm packing it down, and if I put the project down, I have to have a stopper on the end, or otherwise it'll slingshot off the end. To avoid this issue, we actually have a tool called a round needle. And what that is it works and knits and feels, for the most part, just like your stick needles. The obvious difference is this little tube plastic bit between the needles. Now, you can get really high-end round needles that are actually come in kits, so it has just the little tip bits in the different sizes for you, and it has different lengths of cord that you can just snap in or just screw in to the end of your needles for various projects. Or you can do what I have here, is one of those $3-4 round needles that you can get out of a Michaels or a Walmart or whoever sells your craft materials around you. The reason that if you plan to use these a lot, to probably go ahead and splurge a little on that nice kit or that nice set is because these are great for your once in a while use. If you have a set project you know you're going to do a lot, or similar like projects a lot on, but these will break down with wear and tear. Even if a bad crease in the plastic cord, because this is literally just flimsy plastic that's not even truly a cord, these will snap. It's great when it happens halfway through a project. But they do take on a crap ton more stitches. I have comfortably, on this pair of needles, comfortably knitted with 310 stitches. I don't even know what the max is yet that I can fit on them. I kind of hope I don't ever have to find out either. The other great thing about these, what I usually use round needles for, is seamless stuff. If I don't want to sew the project or really keep it down to a minimum, I've done skirts, I've done dresses, I've done tote bags. With round needles, a lot of the bigger stuff, shirts, I've done sweaters mostly on round needles. And even a couple of interesting projects, like cleaves, which are just big baggy sleeves with like a cowl that kind of attaches the sleeves together, so it's like a sweater without the middle section. Fun stuff. That is really great and fun to do on round needles. And it just kind of looks really cool when you're sitting there and people are just staring at you like, what the heck are you doing? But, just like all things, those are pros, and now the cons. Your core determines a lot of your limit and what you can and cannot do on round needles. If you have a really, really short cord, you might actually get away with being able to make a normal sized beanie or hat, or maybe like a smaller bag. But it also means that you can't cast on those 500 stitches that you need to make an afghan. On the other token, where I could cast 500 stitches onto this thing, I can't make a normal sized hat with this. Now, I will say, anything you can do on a stick needle, like previously mentioned, you can do on a round needle. If you were only able to take one of these with you, I would take the round needles. These are more versatile than the stick figure ones. I will say though, the reason I still keep all my stick needles is I don't like the knitting with the cord bouncing up and down all the time. And it gets wrapped in the yarn and it's just annoying when you don't need it. So if you're only working with like 10, 15 stitches, this becomes very unnecessary and messes with your rhythm when you're going through it, if you're not used to it. For you, it might not even bother you, so don't even worry about this part. For me, it bothers me, so I'm going to talk about it. Now, for, say, if you do have like a longer cord like this, or if you just can't find a cord that's short enough for what you want to do, there is another solution. And this is honestly my favorite tool to work with in the knitting world. It's called a DPN, also known as a double-pointed needle. Now these, in a store, you're really only going to have a range between like 3 and 8, maybe sometimes a size 10. To give you an idea, this is a size 8. This works for me because about like 99% of my knitting is done between a 7 and a 9. So I'm okay with having that limit range. You could go online, you can try to find the bigger sizes. Generally speaking though, if you're working with those bigger sizes, you really need to think hard about what you're making. If you're experienced, you know what you're doing, then you're probably not even need to be watching this video. But the reason I say it that way is because the DPNs don't come in a set of 2. Your round needles, your stick needles, 2 needles. Generally speaking, that's all you have is just the 2 points. The DPNs, I think the smallest pack I've ever seen, I saw it once, was a pack of 3. The largest I have seen in a store is a pack of 7. The reason being is because these are meant to specialize doing exactly what the round needles do on a smaller scale. 5 of these will make an excellent, perfect-sized beanie, about medium-large. A total of 80 stitches round in a medium-weight yarn for me. They also are great for making sleeves, socks. You can add pockets onto shirts and things. Anything where you're adding something on top of already a layer, these are fantastic for. I use them for my smaller knits. So if I've got either like a really skinny scarf I'm working on, if I've got flowers or just curly cues or whatever detail work I am doing, these are amazing. However, they do have their limit. First and foremost, what a lot of knitters will comment on these is your stitches will fall off very easily because there's no stopper on either end. This has happened to me a lot. Now, I've become familiar enough with my knitting that I know how to pick up stitches really easily. Doesn't mean I'm always perfect. There is that trouble out there, just so you are all aware. The other part, too, is that, generally speaking, once you go past maybe 4 or 5 needles, it gets really hard to manage all of those different needles without them all falling out of your stitches, as well as the needles themselves are very limited to how many stitches they can hold. This guy I'm holding right here just barely comfortably holds 20 stitches. Fewer, especially on smaller needles, fewer, not a problem. You can go as tiny and tight as you want. A lot of knitters will actually go from a round needle down to the double pointed needles by switching them out as they're knitting. When they're dealing with balls, plushies, pillows, anything that's rounded, because they can decrease stitches on the large scale, and then when it gets too small for the round needles, these are awesome. The third con I would say to these is they are actually dangerous. Any needle used incorrectly or just bad timing with is a dangerous tool. This one actually has stabbed my hand. And I mean literally this needle. I know it doesn't look dull, it looks fat, you'd think, oh, well, what the heck? No. This has actually pierced my hand and hung from my hand because I tried to catch it and did so incorrectly. But still an awesome tool. And I will still say it is something that every knitter should have if they plan to try to get more creative, get a little bit more out there, find something different to make. Towards the other two, you could pretty much for the most part survive with just one or the other if you really wanted to. This one I think is something in addition to either of them is necessary. Another needle I want to cover with you all is called a cable needle. Now, cabling is a twist in the yarn. Traditionally, you take the stitches and you actually twist them on your needle to create this twist in the yarn, this column, this braiding effect. And it appears in a lot of different ways according to how you knit with it. It's a really awesome effect. And even though you start off, it looks complicated, it looks really extreme, once you understand what you're doing, it is so easy. It's all about just counting your stitches. You can get away with it on a DPN. This is especially better if you're doing bigger cabling. However, a cable needle is specifically designed to hold your stitches, specifically just the 3/4 or however many you're working with to twist the yarn. And that's this guy right here. He's double pointed, just like a DPN. Generally speaking though, they have some kind of a divot, whether it's a bigger divot or if it's an actual like an S shape of some kind. For the most part, they're all going to look relatively like this. These are really, really nice with smaller stitch count for your cables, and they hold them in the stitches in the divot bit, so you don't have to worry about fighting with the needle as you're working on the rest of the row. You don't have to worry about the needle sliding out. The stitches will actually hold the needle there themselves just from being in that little catch. It's a really nice tool. Is it absolutely a must-have? No. This is a luxury item. It might make it feel a little bit better. It might be easier to work with you. If you're doing a lot of cabling, yeah, probably a good suggestion to have a couple of these around. But you can get away without them. You could technically, it would be really hard, you could technically even get away with doing cabling without so much as a DPN. and just do it on either your round or on your stick knitting needles. There are other lacing techniques that you can use a cable needle for. They start getting really advanced after a while. Another tool I would say that should be in every knitting bag, believe it or not, has very little to nothing to do with knitting, is a crochet hook. Love this thing to death. Why? Two big reasons: mistakes and loose strings. You have been knitting, you drop the stitch, it goes all the way down in your knitting, maybe it's about like 6 inches, and now all of a sudden you have to pull all of that knitting out. It's terrible. I know, I've been there, I've done that, I hate it. The crochet hook can actually save you. Now, I can, next week actually, make a tutorial for you to show you exactly what I'm talking about right now. But, for all intents of this video, this can go back, catch the stitch you dropped, and loop the yarn through to bring it back onto the needle where you're currently at in your knitting. You don't have to rework everything you lost. Saves the day! It's a superhero! Yay! The other thing that I love this crochet hook for is even on just a solid one-piece, one-color project, you still have that tail in the beginning from where you started and the tail in the end from where you finished. This will help you hide those tails so much faster. It helps get into the knitting stitches and weaves in the yarn a lot of times much more seamlessly than if you actually did it with your fingers. Or what other tool have you. A lot of people like using a yarn needle, which is like a really big plastic sewing needle. That's great. I don't always have that much excess yarn at the end of a project though. Sometimes I luck out and I just have like 4 inches left. Hard to use a yarn needle on that. Generally speaking, you know, you want to use a smaller crochet hook than the needle size you're using. This one is about a 3.75 millimeter or a size F. Every single bundle of yarn, of like Red Heart yarn, will show you a suggested knitting size and a suggested crochet hook size. I always want to go a size or 2 smaller than what's suggested. And if I don't have a suggestion, I go a size or 2 smaller than what the needle I used was. So this I use for all of my pretty much size 8 and down. I use this until I get to like a size 5, and I'll go get a smaller crochet hook. It's just a lot easier to work with those knitting stitches with this. Yeah. You're working with bigger knits, I would actually suggest getting a bigger crochet hook so you're not shredding the fiber and pulling it apart and all the plies come unwound and stuff, and it just looks nasty. The final thing I would suggest to every knitting bag out there is a dedicated pair of scissors that are just fiber scissors, nothing else. No paper, no plastic, no wood, no wire, nothing but fiber. Yarn and fabric, that's it. And I say this because when you're cutting food, when you, God forbid, there was like glue on the paper, just the paper itself, cardboard, those things dull your blade so quickly, especially anything that's a wood product. So paper and cardboard dulls blades very quickly. Thread-based material actually helps sharpen blades. So your thread, your yarn, your fabrics for the most part, fleece is a little tricky in that one, but like cotton fibers and things actually help keep your scissors sharper longer. I would suggest something that's comfortable and something that is durable. This is one of those moments where you want to kind of spend the extra $1 or 2 to get the nicer pair of scissors. I even got this for as a set. So I have one that travels with me on the road, and I have one that stays home in my studio that doesn't leave. They're titanium blades. They are actually nice and big, thick, and heavyweight. This is really nice when I'm dealing with like cotton thread or heavier weight yarns, because it doesn't get stuck in between the blades and not cut. It actually, the scissors will slice right through it. I say this, keep the scissors nice, keeps your knitting cleaner better, and it will guarantee you always have something to help start or finish or continue a project. make sure everyone in your household knows these are fiber scissors, not anything else. And that is what I suggest for your knitting bag, your startup kit, your experimental kit. These are things that are only the start of everything that's out there. I would say, yeah, thank you very much for listening. I hope you took something valuable out of this. I hope that I have encouraged you to go look up some ideas of what you could use these tools for. I am JK with J.K. Crafts, and I hope you all have a great day and see you next week.